everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Lab 207 webcast. My name is Mr. Kite, and I'll be hanging out with you today as we start to near the end of our series on economics and sustainability. Topic for the day is going to be measuring and achieving sustainability. So like always, let me get you your objectives and we'll get going for the day. So by the end of our video today, you should know or be able to do the following things. First thing, describe different indices used to gauge human development. Second, explain the steps of the American policy process. And third, compare and contrast behavioral deterrence and incentives. Basically, we're talking about ways that the government can get, the way the government can get businesses and industry to change or rethink their practices. So let's go ahead and jump in and start talking about some things. Before we actually start talking about different rules or regulations or laws or anything like that, I want to talk about a couple of indices. An indices is an index that talks about something. So today we are going to talk about HDI, which is the Human Development Index, and HPI, the Human Poverty Index. So HDI, the Human Development Index, is used by the UN to rate how developed the people in a country are. And there are three things that are considered in this index. There are the economical side, so what is the GDP of the country, the life expectancy of the population is considered, and the education measured by literacy rate. So if you combine the literacy rates or the education, the life expectancy, and the GDP of a country, that will give you a number that is the development index. Now you can see on the map here, the darker purple a country is, or darker blue, the more developed a country is. So if you check it out over here, we've got America and Canada, you have got France, England, some of the Scandinavian countries, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand as your most developed countries. And then from there, it kind of just goes down the color scale. Something to notice is that most of your least developed countries are right here along the equator in Africa. So that would be the Human Development Index. Now the Human Poverty Index is the exact opposite. It's the way of talking about the opposite of development. So it talks about poverty levels, what percentage of the people die before the age of 40, and how much of the population is illiterate. So those two indexes are used to rank countries based on how developed they are or are not. Now, in America, this is our process for developing environmental regulation, or really any rule or regulation within the governmental system. Now, you can say what you will about our government being dysfunctional at the moment, but when they do need to get something done, or when they do actually succeed in getting something done, here's how it goes down. So the first step of the process is to identify the problem, because you've got to know what you are working on before you start writing rules or regulations. So we're going to say that for this process, our problem is air pollution. We will say that there is too much sulfur in that smoke that's coming out, so we're going to write some policy about sulfur. So we've identified the problem. The next thing is you have got to formulate a policy. So all right, we know our problem is sulfur. What kind of rules are we going to write to combat the sulfur problem? So you write your policy. After that has been written, you have got to go through the Congress and vote on that policy. Once it's been voted on, it becomes adopted. Once it's been adopted, it actually is implemented. This is when it becomes a law that this factory owner would actually have to start complying with. After it's become law and been in effect for a little while and it's been in use, then the authors of it will evaluate the policy. So is the policy doing what it is supposed to be doing? If it is, excellent, we'll leave it in place. If it needs tweaked, then it goes back through the process where they will say, all right, so we solved a lot of the problem, but what is left? What do we still need to do? And then based on what still needs to be done, they will offer amendments. An amendment is basically an addition or a change to the law. And so this law could go around in cycles and cycles forever, getting more or less strict over time. So this is the basic process by which the American government adopts any policy, but we're going to say for today specifically environmental policy. The next thing I want to talk about today is another method that our government, or well, really any government, uses to control the behavior of individuals or industries, and that is through their pocketbook. And there are two basic approaches. The first approach is called a command and control approach. And in a command and control approach, you set a line or a bar or a regulation, and then if people pass that regulation or that line, they're penalized. Okay, so it's basically like you got your rule. If you cross that rule, you get punished. So that is command and control. The second one is incentive-based, where there isn't a rule set, but there are incentives if you do certain things. So a good example right now of an incentive-based system is the American government has got a system right now where if you purchase energy-efficient appliances or make energy-efficient upgrades to your homes, then you get a rebate on your taxes. So they didn't say you have to put energy-efficient devices into your house, but they will give you an incentive, a tax rebate, if you choose to do so. So recognize the difference between the two. You can either say, here's your rule, if you cross the rule you're going to be punished, or we will give you a little extra benefit if you choose to do this thing of your own will. Now, most governments use a combination of these two things to regulate the environment. When necessary, sometimes governments will create what is called a green tax, and a green tax would be basically making a bad behavior expensive. And this would say, for example, if the factory we were talking about back a couple slides put out too much sulfur, then they would be taxed for every extra ton of sulfur they put out. The government might set a limit saying, all right, you can put out 1,000 tons of sulfur a month or whatever. And then if you go above that 1,000 tons, we're going to slap you with a $1,000 fine for every 100 pounds you go over, or something like that. A green tax is any tax that is put into place to discourage behavior that harms the environment. So if the government maybe raises the tax on gasoline, that can be considered a green tax because they are discouraging the purchase of gasoline and then by extension driving. If we ever get around to putting a carbon cap and trade system into place, that would be a green tax because the amount of carbon that a factory produces would be taxed. So just recognize a tax that encourages environmentally sound behavior or discourages environmentally harmful behavior is known as a green tax. And this is where we finish up today with the triple bottom line. Throughout this whole series of videos, we have been talking about rules, regulations, human development, the benefit of humans, and how the environment all play together. And this kind of wraps it all up. Back in the mid-90s, President Clinton started to talk about something called the triple bottom line. Now, most companies, when they are trying to go forward and make a profit, usually their biggest concern is how much profit can we make. There isn't as much consideration given to either human welfare or environmental welfare. Now, based on the company, that may or may not be true. Some companies care a lot about the welfare of people and the environment, so they try to balance their profits with the environment and with the people. President Clinton said that each company or organization should aim for a triple bottom line. In a triple bottom line, economic goals are met while preserving the environment and the good of the people involved. So this diagram on the side kind of reflects this in this Venn diagram. You've got stock market, you got a mountain, and you got people. The ideal place to be in this diagram is right here, where your economic goals are being met, but you are also protecting the environment and you are protecting the welfare of people. Now, some companies, they land up here. They do a really good job of taking care of the environment and making profits, but maybe their labor practices aren't so good. Or maybe the company has got really good labor practices and they make good money, so they're over here, but they don't necessarily think about taking care of the environment. Or, and this is where investors would be unhappy, the company is really good at taking care of people and the environment, but their profits and their economics aren't so good. So for a company to be sustainable and successful, President Clinton said that they should aim for this middle spot right here. And with that, I'm done talking for today. Hope that gave you a little more insight into ways that we talk about government regulation and money in related to environmental problems and issues. Thanks for joining us on the Lab 207 webcast. My name is Mr. Kite, and we'll see you again.